Hello, Carlene, Christine, Tricia, Stephanie, Samantha, Melissa, Susanna, Amanda, Sarah Lee, Catherine, Stella. I hope that you're all doing well. Thank you for finishing half the class already. We have completed 3 weeks of our course. Thank you for all of your excellent participation, all of your contributions, deeply appreciated. In week 3, we were talking about codes of ethics for various organizations. And in the discussion, 2 points of view formed. On the one hand, there were people who thought ethics is ethics, and whether it's a nonprofit, a governmental organization, a for-profit business, ethics should be the same. The ethical code should be the same. Whether it's a small organization or a large organization, ethics should be the same. And the 2 people who perhaps lifted this up most clearly were Christine with her oft-quoted 2 employees or 195,000 employees, nonprofit or not, ethics is ethics, which is a great statement. And Sarah Lee also had that emphasis on whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, small or large, that perhaps nonprofits are held to a higher standard of accountability, but ethics is ethics. And there's a lot of truth to that. There certainly is a lot of truth to that. There's also truth on the other side of the argument. Melissa and Kathy both argued that ethics are different depending on what kind of organization you have, that nonprofits do things a bit differently than for-profit companies in terms of how they set up the rules for their employees, and that the rules for governmental employees are, again, kind of in a third category. And Melissa pointed out that although it's true that ethics across the board are based on the same principles, and one might think that it's common sense to just apply them in particular circumstances, that's not always the way it works. You know, Melissa said, do we really need to spell this out? Isn't it just common sense? And the truth is no, it's not just common sense, or if it is common sense isn't very common. And we do need to spell things out and help people to understand how to apply the principles in particular situations and in particular places, because in different countries, laws, customs, cultures might be different and affect the way our code of ethics is written and our guidelines for our employees are written. So there's truth in both. And I think that's one of the things about ethics is we need to hold in tension the idea that, yes, there are certain core principles that are going to be applicable universally. At least that's what I believe. I believe there are some core principles that are universally applicable, things like honesty and integrity. That doesn't change. But how those things get applied in particular situations does change. Loyalty is another example of a core value, but that might be expressed in different ways in different organizations. So, and you have different responsibilities in different organizations. So I pointed out in the discussion forum, in a for-profit company, you might have a strong obligation to closely guard proprietary information. And so your duty to tell the truth is not applicable when a competitor says, how do you make this? Because you need to protect the proprietary information. And in a nonprofit, it may be that you need to guard donor information, that and that there are particular ways and rules for the way that you treat donors, which you wouldn't have in a for-profit corporation, which doesn't have any donors. Amanda also pointed out that there are significant differences in the way that small and large organizations manage their code of ethics. And I guess she pointed out kind of the extremes in both categories. A very well-managed, very detailed code of ethics for a large organization, and a very poorly constructed kind of fly-by-night one-pager for a small organization. It doesn't necessarily have to be that large organizations with a lot of detail are good and the small organizations with little detail are bad. It could go the other way sometimes. There are some small organizations that don't have very detailed codes of ethics that are functioning very well, and that works for them. But to have something in place that guides employees is what's important. And even more importantly, to have employees know that code and live by that code and be encouraged from leadership to live by that code. That's what really matters. I also this week want to pick up on a comment that happened earlier in the class, and that is there was a little bit of back and forth about it's important to just leave your emotions at the door. That getting emotions involved in ethical decision making or any decision making is a bad idea. And there is a sense in which that's true, and in which I agree with that. We can't let ourselves be carried away by our emotions, especially if we're angry or upset or feel a kind of righteous indignation that somebody did something wrong and they need to be severely punished. We shouldn't let our emotions carry us away. But the truth is without our emotions, we could not make decisions. There have been a variety of studies of people who have had brain damage. The most famous one is of a patient named Elliot, who started having problems and headaches and pain in his head, and it turned out that he had a tumor the size of an orange. And they removed the tumor, but they found that after they removed the tumor, since it damaged the part of the brain that processed emotions, that he was unable to make even simple decisions. He would go to work in his office and he would just spend the whole day trying to decide whether he should organize his documents by the date they were written, how long they are, which one was from what place they were generated from, and he couldn't make those decisions because decision making, it seems, is tied up with our emotions. And they found that when he would view like disturbing things like people being brutalized or a house on fire or anything, nothing happened, no emotion. And he had problems relating with people, making any kind of decision. Very, very tragic. But it tells us something. It tells us that our emotions are tied with our decision making, and so our emotions are tied with our ethics. And another book that really puts the spotlight on this, and I've mentioned it to some of you, I think, is The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. Why good people disagree about politics and religion. And a lot of that has to do with our deep values and our emotions. So our emotions are tied up with ethical decision making. The thing is, the more aware of that we are, and the more that we are able to perceive and for lack of a better word, use our emotions to inform our decision making and be aware that they inform our decision making, the better decisions we can make. When we ignore them or try to suppress them, likely they will drive our decisions in more subtle and unconscious ways, in ways that our better selves might not approve of. Again, thank you for a great week. Thank you for a great first half of the class. If there is any way that I can be helpful to you, please reach out and contact me. Thanks.